Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic interview. It's your Cape Crusader Cody, and we're keeping it geekly with our new guest, Neil Kleid. We're here to break down The Phoenix Chase, a Marvel School of X novel, and everything in between. Neil, welcome to the stream. How are you doing today, man?
Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. We were talking earlier. I had the chance to listen to Spider-Man: Kraven's Last Hunt to kind of get a taste of your work, and I can't stop gushing over it backstage and live. It was awesome. Before we dive into too much of your work, though, I always love starting with the basics. So let's begin with who you are and how you got into writing books.
Yeah, sure. So Neil Kleid, I've been writing comics for a while now, and novels a little bit more recently. I just started because I loved comic books. Passionate as a kid, read them all my life. Always knew I wanted to do something with them. I actually started off as an artist. Worked up a whole bunch of pages and brought them to an editor at DC Comics who said, "You are terrible."
Oh no!
but he said, "Look," he goes, "your anatomy's off, your pacing's not great, but your storytelling's fantastic. You should be a writer." And so that really kind of got me looking at approaching comics and writing from another end. And then it was just a lot of studying, a lot of research, looking how other people did it, starting off with mini comics, doing web comics, working my way through like the indie ranks, and then being lucky enough to, do a X-Men comic here, a Superman comic here, and then mostly my own stuff for the last, 10 years, a lot of independent graphic novels, a lot of dramas. The pro stuff came a little later on. I was lucky enough to meet some editors at Marvel who were doing some prose work. Marvel did a whole lot of prose novels, basically prose adaptations of some classic storylines. And one of the editors there, Stuart Moore, brought me in to adapt Spider-Man: Kraven's Last Hunt, which is a story that I've loved since I was a kid. And I was really honored and privileged to be able to take James DeMatteis and Mike Zeck's classic work and adapt it for prose. You learn a lot of new things when you're writing a book that you don't when you write comics. A little bit more about, economy of the story, economy of the prose, how you have to describe a lot more because you don't have the visuals to really rely on, be a little bit more evocative. And that was really sort of where I broke my teeth a little bit as prose. And since then, I've been lucky enough to do some other work. I did an original novel with Brian Bendis based on his Power series of comics that came out a little while ago. And then I did a short story for School of X, which is an anthology from Aconite, where I really kind of got to touch the X-Men for the first time in a while. And I did a story about Quentin Quire, or Kid Omega. And that was really the jumping off point for The Phoenix Chase, which is the book that I have coming out in 2 weeks.
Man, I mean, how does it feel to have worked with some pretty outstanding names in the industry? And to have worked with so many awesome characters as well. This is like a dream come true almost, it sounds like.
Yeah, you count yourself lucky that, you get the opportunity. Yeah, I know there's a lot of folks that are sort of looking for the opportunities that I've been lucky enough to have. And, you count your blessings and you take every opportunity and you make the most of it as you go on. The characters, look, publishers let me play with their toys. It's not often, but when I do, I try to get in there and make my mark. And I hope I get the opportunity to do more of it going forward. But it's a nice balance. I've gotten to play with and write, like you've said, some landmark characters. I've written Spider-Man, I've written X-Men, I've written Wonder Woman. And I balance that off with my own characters and my own graphic novels. So I get to kind of do both, which is nice as a writer to be able to kind of build worlds and also play in someone else's world.
So I do want to touch a base on the Panic, but before we do that, I am curious about Spider-Man: Kraven's Last Hunt. How was that taking it, pre-existing work and kind of doing, a novel based off of that? What went into that? I mean, you did such an awesome job, because we don't have the art, the visual, so you had to rely on words, and you were able to paint that world and just do it such justice. So I'm curious, what kind of went into that?
Well, it's great because you have the comics to really base things on, and they're almost sort of your storyboard, right? So when you're trying to paint a picture and tell people, this is what's happening to Kraven or Peter or Mary Jane or what have you, you really can look at, Mike Zeck's amazing visuals, and almost what I tell a lot of people is that I'm just like narrating it. I'm just kind of documenting, this is what I'm seeing, and this is what you should be kind of visualizing in your head, because the rain is falling and
Mm-hmm.
it's pattering off the costume or what have you. Like being able to really go panel by panel and translate that to prose is really that's part of the challenge and a lot of the fun. But the great thing is that with a prose novel, you get to expand, right? So comics, 22 pages, set number of panels. You have to tell the story in a really quick, condensed manner. With a novel, you get to kind of like move some elbows out and make some room for yourself and get in your character's head. And so for a character like, Kraven the Hunter, or even Spider-Man, who both come with their own neuroses, and the other two main characters, who are Mary Jane and Vermin, I got to really spend a little time in each of their heads and expand on the story that that DeMatteis and Zach were telling, and I hope I did it justice. It was a lot of fun. What was actually also great is that I got to not just live in those 6 issues, but pull some threads from beforehand and afterwards, and really bring in a lot of the canon things that were happening around Spider-Man at the time in all 4 of his titles, and really create like a fuller picture of his worldview at the time.
I love that so much, and you did a remarkable job. You put the reader behind the mask, and it was such a different experience for Spider-Man. Was there any like were you nervous at all? It just seems like there's a lot of weight going into this.
Yeah, I mean, you're nervous because number one, you're telling a story that someone else told, and you want to do honor to them and make sure that you're not kind of messing it up too much. But I mean, it's Spider-Man, right? So like, there comes the weight with that in general. This is a character who's been around for a while and will be around long after I am, and you want to make sure that you're translating him as a character and the supporting characters around them, in a way that does them justice. And so there's definitely a lot of anxiety around writing something like this. And the hard thing is that this is a very dark story, and so I spent a lot of time in a very dark headspace when I was doing this. You can ask my family. I worked about 3 to 4 months on the book, and a lot of the times you have to kind of take yourself away from like your kids who are, young and happy and watching things like Paw Patrol and whatever. And then it's like, all right, suicide, let's go.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do. You have to be able to switch gears. The same thing when you're a writer, when you're juggling multiple stories. Sometimes you're writing an all ages story, and then sometimes you're writing a really dark drama, and being able to kind of have that muscle where you can kind of like turn on a dime and say, okay, right now I'm writing an all ages adventure, but now I have to write about like a train crash. Like being able to kind of switch there, that's part of the job.
I could just picture writing about Spider-Man and Kraven all drugged up and like, okay, we got to lay the kids down to bed. All right, time for Spider-Man and Kraven to get all drugged up and then go at each other's throats. We have Mama Geekly real quick on Facebook saying she really loves the covers. The colors match perfectly with the illustration. And then she always asks, but she's interested. Do you have a favorite author, like anyone that you like to read?
So I've been reading a lot of Anthony Bourdain lately, a lot of travel books. He's a very famous late chef, so a lot of his travel books and cookbooks, that's kind of where my head's been at lately. From a comic point of view, I really cover the breadth and width. I'm a really big Will Eisner fan, so Will Eisner is sort of like the grandfather of graphic novels. A lot of his books are very rooted in Judaica, so I'm Jewish, and so for me that's very important, and it's really very evocative work, very groundbreaking in terms of the illustration and what he was doing with the page. So Will Eisner, anything from like Dropsy Avenue to The Dreamer, to The Spirit, which is the book that he's most well known for. That's really what lines a lot of my shelf. For superhero books, I'm kind of reading a lot right now. I'm catching up on X-Men continuity. I've been doing that for the last several years.
Yeah, there's a lot.
There's a lot. I haven't read X-Men in quite a while, and so when I started to kind of dive back into it for School of X and for the Phoenix Chase, I really started, I believe, with like the Morrison era and kind of moved forward from there, and then jumped back to Claremont and Cockrum and Neil Adams, and kind of looking at moments that really were going to tie into the narratives that I wanted to tell. A lot of the cosmic stuff, all the stuff with the Shi'ar and the Starjammers and Phoenix and the McCran Crystal, all of that was stuff that I did later, after I went through Morrison and Bendis, and now obviously the Hickman era, right, the Krakoan era, which is something that I'm just devouring week by week. I'll kind of read anything, to be honest with you. I'm a fan of trying a bunch of different things, and if I love it, I love it. If I don't, I don't. Al Ewing, I'm not really sure. Ewing. A lot of his work on X-Men Red and the work he did on Immortal Hulk. I've been reading a lot of that lately. And then from the indie point of view, Saga, my big book is Saga by Vaughn and Staples. That's the one I read every month. And then just trying things. I'm actually currently working through Kate Beaton's Ducks, which is a big graphic novel. I'm enjoying that right now. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. And we got some love for Eisner in the chat as well. So definitely a good writer. So speaking of working in other people's worlds, let's talk about working in your own. You wrote the Panic trade paperback, which was 136 pages. For everyone that is watching, right here is a link. You can get this from Dark Horse right now. And if you if you can't, put this wherever you can. Share it on Facebook, Twitter. Word of mouth is 100% free. How was that kind of being able to do your own thing for a change and kind of, work with an artist? How was that experience for you?
I mean, I would say that most of my career has been focused on my own work, right? So I did a book called Saber for Dark Horse, which was a young adult all ages adventure that was a lot of fun. The Panic is something I did for Comixology Originals with Andrea Muti. I've been actually writing this story for over a decade. It's a story I came up with after 9/11 that has really evolved over the years about a group of strangers who are stuck on a train after some mysterious crash happens, and they have to really put aside all their prejudices, racial prejudices, political opinions, to really come together as humans and survive. And that's really what the story is about. And it's about, will that happen? And it's really evolved as the politics in America have changed and evolved over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to finally get that story out, at least the first installment, hopefully there'll be later installments, was really a huge triumph for me and Andrea, who were really excited about the book. It came out from Dark Horse as a collection in the fall. As you've said, you can get it anywhere books are sold. We're hoping to do more. We did leave it at a place which is closed and could end there, but there's definitely more to the story, and we're hoping to get there at some point.
I love the idea of people putting their differences aside to come together. It's sad we can't see that more in the world. I think we could really achieve greatness if we could do that.
Well, I mean, if you read the book, it's not that they did. The question is, can they? And you can see that some of them can and some of them can't.
Almost following kind of like what's actually happened after 9/11, right? Like,
it's a very political book, and I know people. Look, it's my point of view. I have a very specific political point of view that definitely colors some of the story. I did try to look. It's New York, so anytime you look at a cross section of anywhere in New York, you're going to get all types of people from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of politics. I try to do the best I can to bring all those voices into the mix. I'm sure that because it's me, it's probably leaning a specific way, but you do what you can, right? And these are the conclusions I've drawn. The nice thing, well, not nice, but like right around the time the book came out, there actually was an incident on a subway here in Brooklyn where thankfully people did come to the aid of other people, right? There were, I think there was a shooting, and you had doctors kind of jumping into the fray and other people kind of working to get other people out. And that's kind of what you want. You're hopeful that people will put everything aside to just say, it's a life, it's a human, we're going to work together to save people. I guess our story is maybe the cautionary tale about what would happen if that doesn't happen, right? What if people don't kind of lean into their best intentions and lean into the best, who they should be? What would that look like? And hopefully, 5 issues will show you our conclusions drawn, even if they're not the ones that you draw yourself.
That's so awesome, though. I love just kind of diving into the different aspects of that. It seems like you do a really good job of like feeling out these characters and developing like the emotional aspects of them and really diving into their mindsets. Yeah,
I mean, I think that's the draw as a writer, to be able to kind of take a character and look at their specific arc or motivations over time and have the chance to sit in their head enough so that either they learn something or you learn something. Yeah. And the Phoenix Chase is like the perfect example of that, the book that's coming out on the 16th. Taking these characters who you maybe seen here and there in the comics, some of them who have been fleshed out really well by, a stellar rotating number of fantastic creators, and sort of offer my take on it, and for me to get in their heads and say, here's, something that motivates me. One of the themes in my story is, like, in all my stories, is legacy, fathers and sons, mentors and students, and really kind of looking at these characters and how they interrelate and how they work through the issues they have. That was really what drew me to the story that I wanted to tell in the Phoenix Chase.
And for everyone watching, right here is the link to the Phoenix Chase. You could pre-order it right now. This is coming out May 16th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, May 16th.
So right here is the link for you guys to go to the bookshop and get this. And once again, if you can't pre-order it, simply put this wherever you can: Facebook, Twitter. Word of mouth is 100% free, and you have nothing to lose getting this project out there. So you said you wrote a novel that kind of led to the way, the roadway to this beforehand?
Yep. Yeah, so this book here, School of X, which is out already, has been out for about a year now, is an anthology of stories based in the world of the X-Men. And it's focused on sort of the younger generation of X-Men. And it's set during the Brian Bendis era, where really kind of hones in on the Charles Xavier School at the time. The X-Men were split. You had the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning and the Charles Xavier Institute. And that's where we kind of put our focus. And so it's all these stories that don't necessarily connect to one another, but they're really standalone. And my story is about Quentin Quire, who is also really likes to go by his mutant name, Kid Omega. And if you know Kid Omega, you know that he's got a very colorful history. He started off as kind of I don't want to say a villain, but kind of a menace, really kind of questioning Charles Xavier in his dream. And he's been sort of, I want to say, up and down over the years, from villain to threat to menace to nuisance to comic relief, and then now in the the Krakoan age, the current age, really kind of a hero, or at least somewhat of a hero. And so what I like is the era in which we're telling. He kind of went quiet for a while, and for me, those are the formative years. Those are the years that sort of connect there to here, where he really learns the value of what it means to be a teammate, a friend, a hero. And so that's what I wanted to explore. And so the story that's in this book is called Kid Omega Faces the Music. And it's a time travel story where Kid Omega and his best pal Glob, Herman, go to a convention to steal Wonder Man's glasses. Wonder Man, who's a well-known Avenger, they want to steal his glasses. They're big Wonder Man fans. And along the way, they get involved in a fight between Wonder Man and Kang the Conqueror, and they end up bouncing through time. And they bounce through various touch points in X-Men history, and specifically various touch points that connect to Magneto, who is somebody that Kid Omega is a huge fan of. And over the course of the story, Quentin really learns the value of being selfless instead of selfish, really what it means to sacrifice himself for others. And he kind of learns something along the way. That's what you want from a good story. And so when we finished the story, I was really happy with it. I got to play with his voice, which is very trickster focused. I was watching a lot of Loki at the time, Loki, the TV show on Disney Plus. And that really helped inform kind of the voice a little bit of how I wanted Quentin to sound. But he's also very much me. I'm very much sarcastic, and I reference a lot of pop culture. And so you see a lot of that in the story. And I really felt I had more to say. And I had this idea for a story that involved the Phoenix, which, if you know Quentin, his legacy is tied to the Phoenix. He was a host, and potentially maybe the Phoenix in the future. And I also wanted to tell a story set in Marvel's cosmic landscape, really kind of get the X-Men out into space, because those are the stories that I like best. And so I reached out to my editor and said, look, I have this idea. I don't know if Marvel's looking for anything. I'd love to do a full novel. And I pitched her the idea, and she was like, that's the craziest idea I've ever heard. I love it. We should do it. And so Marvel really agreed with us. I didn't get a ton of notes from them, which is kind of nice. I got notes because it's Marvel and they're really good at what they do. But they really kind of embraced what Gwen Nix, who's my editor, and I were trying to attempt. And it's this really it's not like a buddy comedy or a space travel story or anything, but it's kind of all those. And it's really, the idea is that, just here's the elevator pitch: Kid Omega starts a third mutant school, Mutants Without Borders, and he does it with his friends, and he's trying to get everybody involved, and his friends all get kidnapped by some mysterious aliens, and it's his fault. And the aliens basically say to him, if you want your friends back, have the message is, have Summers bring a phoenix egg to us. But they don't know where, they don't know who these people are, and so he's got to go figure it out, and he has to kind of go hat in hand to who he assumes is the Summers they're talking about, Cyclops, and say, you got to help me. Even though he has to kind of like suck it up and say, oh my God, I can't believe I need to tell you I need help, but I need help. And so unfortunately Scott can't go for various reasons, and so he gets the next best thing, which is Alex Summers, who is Havok. And so it's Havok and Quentin teaming up with the Starjammers to go on a scavenger hunt across space, find this phoenix egg, and rescue his friends. And along the way, you really kind of meet a lot of cool Marvel cameos. There's a lot of people that I've always wanted to tell stories on. They're all in this book, and which was kind of fun to be able to tell
awesome
stories with some of these characters that I've grown up reading and now get to write. And what's also great about it is that it ties into themes that I love to talk about, which is legacy. And it's about, fathers and sons. You've got Alex's hang-ups. You've got Quentin's hang-ups. You've got, they're with the Starjammers, so you've got Corsair in there, and him and Alex have a specific relationship. Him and Quentin develop a specific relationship, which may not be great. And so there's the three of them kind of in this circle, really kind of like trying to learn from one another and grow, all set amid this, like I said, galactic Marvel landscape, and really tying into very key points of Marvel continuity along the way.
So we have some hype in the chat. J. Michael Miller over on YouTube saying this book sounds like a blast and love Havok, and then Mama Geekly sounds like a story I wouldn't put down until I read the whole book. I can't wait. I got my pre-order in this. This sounds like it's going to be amazing. I got to ask though, how was it to write Magneto, or to play at least with that character a little bit? I'm sure that's a character of great importance to you.
It is. So I'm a big fan of Magneto. He's probably one of my favorite X-Men characters, besides the fact that he's got an amazing helmet and he's got this sense of gravitas to him. And he's definitely, like, when you talk about some of the top 10 Marvel villains, I mean, Magneto's up there, right?
Yeah, he's badass.
and the great thing about him, like all good villains, is he doesn't think he's a villain, right? So to him, he feels justified in what he does, as does Dr. Doom, right? So to me, that's really, really great to be able to look at this character who, I mean, has done some terrible things, but also has done it in a way that he can justify it, right? And this story, the short story that I did, I'm sure you've seen the visual because Quentin's worn it along, the t-shirt that says Magneto was right, And so the tagline for my story was, which Magneto was right? Because Magneto has changed over the years. He started off as this, mutant revolutionary, but then he became, the teacher for the New Mutants. And then, every iteration of Magneto, he's learned and grown, and he's grown. And so for me, that was the point. It was Quentin being able to kind of look at Magneto over the years and see how his character has developed and realize, oh my God, maybe I should do the same. The more important thing for me is also that Magneto is a Jewish character. And I obviously am Jewish, and I would like to tell more stories with Jewish heroes and villains and be able to explore what their Judaism means to them. I wasn't able to do that here. It's just the narrative sort of didn't supply it. But if allowed to kind of touch those characters a little bit more, whether it's Magneto or Kate Pryde or Leonard Samson, in Marvel, there's plenty more. Moon Knight, there's tons of Jewish characters out there. And for me, what I would love to see is just more of those characters brought to the stage, and have the story about kind of who they are, how their religion, how their history has sort of shaped who they are or who they want to be. Because for me, especially with kids of my own who read comics and devour them, I want them to be reading those stories. I want them to see themselves in the comics that they read. And I think that's very valuable. And I think that same thing can be said for the films and the TV that you see coming out. I'm a very big believer, as are many people of Jewish faith, that we need more Jewish representation in especially in superhero comics and in television and in movies and beyond superheroes, even just in any form of media.
Absolutely.
In a way that doesn't feel stereotyped, doesn't feel one note or obviously anti-Semitic. And so for me, that's something that's very important. So Magneto, who has his roots in, the Holocaust, has his roots in being, very a big advocate for people who are oppressed. To me, he is an important character, and I hope he continues to be that type of character in any way that he's represented in film, television, or books or comics.
Absolutely. You also touched another important character too, Kang. Like, how was it, writing that story and then seeing him on the screen? Like, how did that feel?
So it was really cool because gravitas again, this
Mm-hmm.
character who you get to like have this like very like vocal Shakespearean language kind of come out. That's always fun to write. He appears very shortly in the story, but he obviously has a key part of the story. And again, I was writing it around the time that Loki came out, so I knew that, like, I kind of had the inkling that this was coming. And then when they announced that he was going to show up in Quantumania, there was actually excitement for me because I'm like, oh, cool, I get to, write about a character who's now going to be all over. And hey, maybe I can hashtag him, and awesome. Just like in the current Phoenix chase, I know that I mentioned this to you, and I don't think I should spoil it for those who are going to read the book, but there's a movie coming out shortly, and some characters from that movie will appear in the Phoenix chase. And I was excited to be able to write those characters and say, oh, cool, because it's coming out, this summer, and you've got some other Marvel characters who will show up in a cinematic way. And it's really not that hard to put two and two together if you think of the Marvel cosmic landscape, who those characters might be. And so it was a lot of fun. So it's actually probably my favorite scene of the book, to be able to write that scene and just touch the, like I said, the toys and kind of play with them and put my voice to, to them. It's not only fun, but it's kind of a privilege.
Now, back to the Phoenix chase. For anyone who is maybe a first time consumer or viewer, listener to Kid Omega, can you tell us a little bit about, what his powers is? Like, what's the big deal about him?
Yeah, sure. So Kid Omega is, in his name, so an Omega mutant is a mutant whose powers reach sort of the upper limit, upper tier of that power set. And so for Kid Omega, it's telepathy. He is one of the, if not one of the strongest telepaths on the planet. And his powers have extended beyond telepathy to telekinesis, as well as, like I said, he's sort of been touched by the Phoenix, so he's sort of a Phoenix host, as it were, or will be again. But he does a lot of things like using his psionic powers to create like tangible items. So he's created in the comics, we've seen like psionic shotguns and cages and things like that. So being able to kind of shape his mind and access, what do they say, that most humans use 10% of their brain? He uses more than that. He's very smart, and he's also kind of a wise ass. He's kind of a wise ass, and so being able to kind of use his mouth and his brain in tandem gets him into a lot of trouble, but also gets a lot of people out of jams. And for the history, for those who don't know, he appeared in the original Grant Morrison run of New X-Men as a student at Xavier's, and actually instigated a riot when he chose to question the Xavier School method. And he's really a strong advocate for mutant kind and mutant superiority, which is why he embraces everything Magneto does. And eventually, in the Bendis era, what Scott Summers is doing, because post Avengers versus X-Men, in that era, Scott is a very strong advocate for mutant rights and mutants first. And to Quentin, it's a lot like what Magneto was doing, back in 1963, right? So it moves from Magneto was right to Cyclops was right. And so he has a lot of respect for Cyclops, but he's also Cyclops. So he's, kind of like the narc of the X-Men. And so there's this sense of like, well, I love what he's doing, but he's still Cyclops. So like, how do I balance that out? And Quentin, along the way, like I said, he was the guy that helped instigate the schism between the X-Men at that time. He walked into, I think it was a UN conference, and put everybody's had everybody like telepathically took control of all the delegates and had them say their worst fears on television, and that got mutants in the spotlight in a bad way, and that really kind of led to a division between Cyclops and Wolverine, and that's what led to that era where we had the Jean Grey School and the Xavier School. And so he's been involved at key touch points along the way, and I feel like this is my chance to redeem him a little bit, or try to. One of the best notes I've gotten so far, we've got a few advanced like reader reviews, and the best review I got so far was, "You made me like him," which is like, all right, I think I won. Like that works for me. But hopefully there's more than just Quentin to draw you into this book. You've got Alex Summers, who, if you're a big fan of the Summers family, like I am, Alex is this character who has just been grappling self-esteem issues since the beginning. Definitely, I don't want to say Cyclops light, as Quentin calls him in the book, but like very much questions himself as a leader, questions himself as a mutant, and as a hero. And we explore a lot of that in the book. Around the time of the book that takes place, he's actually on a team of Avengers. That was when Uncanny Avengers first came out, and Alex is actually leading the team. And so he's sort of questioning himself, like, who am I to lead the Avengers team that has Captain America on it? How am I fit to do this? And it's also really kind of relates to how he led the Starjammers right before that. Starjammers, for those of you who don't know, are a very amazing group of intergalactic space pirates, traditionally led by a guy named Corsair, who is Scott and Alex Summers' father. And so at the time around Uncanny Avengers, like a little bit before, Corsair had died, and Alex took over the group. And so he was not just questioning himself as a leader, but questioning himself as a leader as compared to his father, who led the team beforehand. And so you've got a nice stew of a lot of like psychologically damaged people kind of working together to find this Phoenix egg in the book. And it's a lot of conflict that really kind of lets the characters grow. So hopefully people will love that.
That's the one thing I love so much about books and novels, is you're able to really dive into some of these deeper emotional things that like a comic might not be able to hit, because you're able to really dive into their psyche, into their thinking, where comics kind of struggle with that. And it's so awesome to hear the different things that happen within this book, especially the legacy aspect of it too. I'm a father myself, so that type of thing is big in my world too. So I'm really excited for this to drop, guys. Once again, this is dropping May 16th. Get those pre-orders in while you still can. Get it while it's still hot. So how's it feel? We'll begin wrapping this up. How's it feel to get that chance to create your own unique story for Kid Omega, to kind of give them that redemption, and it's your take. It's not anything else that anyone else has written. Like, this is just kind of your wheel.
No, I mean, like I said, not only a privilege or an honor, but it's a lot of fun. It's to be able to kind of, not everybody gets a chance to tell an X-Men story and their own X-Men story, right? And so whether you say, oh, it's in the comics or in the books or a film or a TV or movie, like getting the chance to just tell the story that you want to tell, there's no greater feeling. And look, obviously things have to change along the way. This is it's the X-Men, it's a franchise. There's things that you can do, you can't do, what have you. But for the most part, I would say that the story really was the story I told from day one. Not a lot changed as a whole. And that is kind of rare, to be able to kind of take a story and conceive it from beginning to end and put it out there in a few minor tweaks. But for the most part, it's the story. And I hope people like it. One of the things that I always kind of say, especially with characters who are around for a long time, is even though it's my story and my take, I couldn't have told the story without, standing on the shoulders of some giants, right? People who have come before, Lee, Neil Adams, Dave Cockrum, Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Grant Morrison, Frank Quitely, all the people, Brian Bendis, the slew of creators who have worked on X-Men over the years, and even beyond X-Men, the Marvel arena, being able to take these little tidbits from along the way and say, oh, this one really would fit nicely in here. This character works well over here. Being able to be allowed to build on their stories, the stories that I grew up reading and my kids have grown up reading, is just nothing short of amazing. And hopefully I'll get to do more of it. Even if I don't to be able to at least tell the story. And if this is the last Marvel story I ever tell, I would be completely satisfied with the story I told.
That's awesome. We have Connie over on YouTube saying she has to read The Phoenix Chase. Absolutely, guys. Once again, right there is that link. So what's next for you in 2023 outside of the book release? Do you have anything else or any other projects that you might be able to talk about?
Yeah, I've got 2 things coming up. One, hopefully in the next month or 2, my first Kickstarter for a book that I did years ago as a digital comic called Kings and Canvas. It was a book that I did with my friends Jake and Frank, and it's basically a fantasy story about a guy who gets out of jail after being locked up for 10 years, and he's a former boxer who punches his way out of prison and goes across a changed America to try to get back the family that he lost. It's really cool. It's like a post-apocalyptic fantasy. There's boxing dragons in it, so it's a lot of fun. And it was a story we told back in 2015. We only got to do 5 issues of it, and so we're doing the 6th issue, and then we're going to kickstart the collection. So look for that from us soon. And then I'm working on another comic, creator-owned book that's coming out in 2024 with my friends John Broglia and Ellie Wright, as edited by our friend Sarah Litt. And it is a Jewish suburban crime story, actually set in the town that I live.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's going to be a lot of fun. It's a very intimate little tale about friends and family and religion and crime. And it's very cathartic for me to be able to tell that story. There are going to be a lot of people that read this and say, this guy's you, right? And I'm going to be like, well, all characters are me, but yeah, this one's me. And so we're really excited for that one. I don't want to say too much more about the title of it or where it's coming out, but keep follow me on social media. I'm Neil Kleid most places, on Instagram and Twitter, and I'll be talking more about it. You can actually see some teases of the art, on those social media channels. So and then I'm working on other stuff. I'm always trying to do more. Would love to tell more X-Men story. Would love to tell more Marvel story. Editors,
Marvel, if you're listening,
give me a call. Thank you. But other than that, I'm always just going to be telling stories, and that's my plan.
We have one last question from the chat. To read Phoenix Chase, can you start reading it alone, or should you read the other 2 books that are kind of within that series?
No. So it does definitely reference. I believe there's a reference to the book that comes before it in the School of X series. I think it's Sound and Light. It's a Dazzler story. But it's not necessary. You don't have to read the book beforehand. I mean, I would read it because it's a good book, and you definitely want to read all the Aconite School of X books because they're fantastic. But you can definitely read Kid Omega on its own. What I may do, I was thinking about this, is once the book is out, maybe doing kind of like an annotation thread on Twitter to like talk about all the little references along the way. Sort of just say like, okay, this point was pulled from this comic. Because I would say that most of what you see in the book is really pulled from the comics continuity. One of the comics that I've been talking about, that you could read before you dive into this is Emperor Vulcan, which is a book by Chris Yost that came out a while ago. And it's about the third Summers brother, Gabriel Summers. And it's definitely much set in the Marvel Galactic landscape. And there was a lot of influence in that book into my book. So definitely pick that one up.
Awesome.
If you want to kind of get your headspace into it.
Absolutely. So Neil, before we wrap things up completely, I always love ending the show on some strong notes. So first, we like to ask for a little bit of advice for anyone out there who might be interested in getting into writing themselves. So with that being said, for anyone maybe just struggling, they're reading their stuff over, they're not really digging it, and they're having trouble just getting going, getting in the zone. What would be some of your advice to kind of help them get motivated in achieving that?
So you caught me at the perfect time, because I've been sort of in a period of self-reflection myself for the last 2 months, where I've been kind of questioning the work that I'm doing and sort of my writing plan. And there's days where you're just like, I just don't want to write. I don't want to do this. This is not going anywhere. I'm having trouble getting momentum. And this is really hard to say, because a lot of people say, just keep going, right? Just keep doing it. Even if it's terrible, just keep kind of getting pages down per day. But I'm a big believer in mental health. And I'm a big believer in, if you're having trouble, this is not a race. Walk away. take a minute, take a day, take 2 days, take as long as you need for you to feel antsy about it and say, you know what, I had a little bit of time from it. I spent time with my family, with my friends. I just went and watched a bunch of movies, right? I went to the gym. If you need time, take that time, because focusing on it too much and letting yourself feel burnt out by it is not good for your mental state. And my opinion is, take the time you need, breathe a little bit, and then the writing will always be there when you come back. And when you get into it, give yourself a plan. Say, all right, you know what? Maybe I'm going to do, if it's a comic, 2 pages a night. Or maybe I'm going to do, if it's a prose novel, 100 pages a night, or 100 words per, not 100 pages.
I was like, wow.
I mean, if you can, God bless you, because I can't. But do 100 words to 1,000 words.
I'll stick to comics.
Yeah. What is your, what's your comfort level? Like, you know what your time is like, right? But what I would say is, if it's important to you, make the time, right? Maybe you don't watch an hour of television that night. Maybe you instead spend an hour on a writing sprint.
Mm-hmm.
Read other things, right? Don't just, if you want to write stories, read all kinds of stories. Read comics, read novels, read nonfiction, watch movies, watch television, talk to people, get out in the world, right? One of the great things about this book, Kid Omega, is that I have kids and I listen to the way they speak. And some of that is informed by the things that Kid Omega, some of the things that he says is informed by that. I go out to the mall, I go out to the park, right? Listen, be in the world, be active in the world, get experience and bring that experience to your writing. Don't just write what you know, write what you're scared about knowing, write what you don't think that you need to research. All of that is really important to your growth as a writer. But the most important thing to me is, and will always be, protect your mental health first. Make sure that you're not beating yourself up about it. Write at your pace. There's no race. Nobody's ahead of you. Nobody's behind you. Just focus on you. And to me, that, I think, is the key to being a balanced writer.
I think you were speaking directly to me. Like I am I struggle with taking time off. I took 2 days off, Monday and Tuesday. Because I realized that's because you go so hard at it without realizing that if you're hitting that wall, that's delaying your time even further. You know what I mean? So perfect advice. We have J. Michael Miller saying love threads like that, so keep an eye out for that. Neil, last but not least, what are you consuming outside of creating? I know we were talking about what you read, but any certain TV shows you watching? If you play any video games, like any games at all?
I'm not a video game guy, to be honest with you. I do have an X-Men arcade game in my basement that I play every now and then.
Which one?
The classic one. I mean, it's the arcade one-up.
Okay, yeah, I gotcha.
It's the new version. So I play that, and then on there is also Captain America and the Avengers, which is the reason I bought it. Like both games. But from TV, yeah, I'm actually currently devouring the final season of Better Call Saul.
Perfect.
Which is great. I'm almost done with it. I got 2 episodes to go. I'm watching Ted Lasso, which is a breath of fresh air. I'm watching Severance when it comes back, which is gripping and amazing. I'm watching Barry on HBO, which is also gripping and amazing. Superhero stuff, I'm still kind of watching The Flash, just waiting for it to finish. All the Disney Plus shows, both Star Wars and the Marvel shows. My family watches that together. We get to sit down and kind of do that week by week, which is a lot of fun. We just finished The Bad Batch, Star Wars The Bad Batch, which was fantastic.
I love that. I just started season 1, and I was like, why did I wait so long?
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Yeah. Now eat it up. It's fantastic. Books. I'm actually reading some old Marvel, like 90s Marvel novels now. Somebody inspired me to go and get some out from the library. So X-Men Empire's End and Spider-Man The Venom Factor, all those old like Byron Price 90s era novels that kind of came out back then. But I'm also reading Don Winslow. Don Winslow, who's a great writer. He wrote a series which I think is called the Cartel series. It was Power of the Dog, Cartel, and The Border, which is about the Mexican drug trade. And now I'm reading a series that he did that's set in Boston and Rochester. The first one was called City on Fire, and now just this week, the second one, City of Dreams, just came out. And those are really great if you're looking for like a good, hard-hitting, like noir style crime book. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Hey, Neil, this has been an awesome chat. We're going to have to get you back on for that Kickstarter and deep dive that as well. Everyone that is watching, right here is the link one last time to get this book. You have until May 16th, and that's when it's out in store, so be sure to get it while it's still hot. That being said, it is time for us to wrap it up. I hope you all have a lovely Wednesday, but most importantly, guys, keep it geekly.